coffee burned my fingertips through the thin paper cup, but I barely noticed. When you work 16-hour shifts 6 days a week, pain becomes background noise. I hurried across the polished marble floor of the Grand Plaza Hotel, weaving between businessmen and tourists who didn't spare me a glance. In my gray maid's uniform, I was invisible, just another piece of furniture keeping their world running smoothly. "Room service for 1242, I whispered to myself, balancing the tray against my hip while pressing the elevator button. The espresso was for some VIP guest who'd thrown a fit about the in-room coffee machine. Management had sent me running to the cafe across the street because apparently a man worth millions couldn't possibly drink from a Keurig. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding, revealing a cramped space already occupied by 2 men in dark suits. They shifted slightly, creating just enough space for me to squeeze in, but their eyes remained fixed on their phones. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to become even smaller, more invisible than I already was. "Did you see who's staying on the 12th floor?" One man muttered to the other. "Shut up," his companion hissed. "Not here." I kept my gaze fixed on the coffee cup, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. In this job, hearing nothing and seeing nothing was how you survived. Especially when you desperately needed this paycheck to cover the mounting medical bills your insurance wouldn't touch. 6 months after my father's stroke, we were drowning in debt, and my minimum wage job at the city's most luxurious hotel was the only thing keeping us afloat. The elevator stopped at the 12th floor, and I slipped out, careful not to spill the precious espresso. The hallway stretched before me, eerily silent compared to the bustling lobby. Each step on the plush carpet felt like walking through quicksand. Room 1242 was at the end of the corridor, the corner suite, reserved for those who paid more for one night than I earned in a month. I balanced the tray on one hand and raised the other to knock when the door suddenly swung open. I stumbled forward, the coffee cup tipping, hot liquid splashing across my hand and onto the pristine white shirt of the man standing in the doorway. "I'm so sorry," I gasped, mortification washing over me like ice water. "Please, let me—" The words died in my throat as I looked up. The man before me wasn't angry. He was terrified. His face was pale, a sheen of sweat on his forehead, and his eyes darted over my shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. "Are you alone?" he demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. Before I could answer, he grabbed my arm and pulled me inside, shutting the door behind us with a soft click. The suite was immaculate, untouched even, except for the desk by the window where papers were strewn about, a laptop open, the screen casting a blue glow over the dimly lit room. "Sir, I'm just here with your espresso," I said, my voice trembling. "I should go." "You can't," he said, running a hand through his silver-streaked dark hair. He looked to be in his 50s, with the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers, all sharp angles and authority. But now that face was contorted with fear. "They're coming for me. You need to listen carefully." I'd seen plenty of eccentric behavior from wealthy guests, but this was different. This wasn't entitlement or arrogance. This was raw terror. "Who's coming for you?" I asked, setting down what remained of the coffee on a side table. He moved to the window, peering through a crack in the curtains down at the street below. "The Castellano family. I've been feeding information to the FBI for months, building a case. But someone leaked my identity." He turned back to me, his eyes haunted. "They don't just kill traitors. They make examples of them." My heart hammered against my ribs. I'd heard whispers about the Castellano crime family. Everyone in the city had. They owned politicians, cops, judges. People who crossed them didn't just disappear. They were found in pieces. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, backing toward the door. "I don't want any part of this, because you're already part of it," he said grimly. "You've seen my face. You know I'm here. That makes you a liability." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I thought of my father, helpless in his hospital bed, waiting for me to visit after my shift with the magazine he liked, and the contraband cookies the doctors had forbidden. "If something happened to me, please," I whispered. "I won't say anything. I have a father who depends on me. I can't—" The man's expression softened slightly. "What's your name?" "Elena," I said. "Elena Reyes." Elena, he repeated, as if testing the weight of it on his tongue. I'm Michael, and I'm not going to hurt you, but I need your help. A harsh knock at the door made us both freeze. Housekeeping, called a male voice that sent chills down my spine. No housekeeper at the Grand Plaza sounded like that, like gravel and cigarettes and danger. Michael pressed a finger to his lips, then motioned for me to follow him into the bathroom. He closed the door silently behind us, leaving just a sliver open. There's a flash drive in my pocket, he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. Everything the FBI needs to take down the Castellanos is on it. Names, dates, account numbers. If I don't make it out of here, another knock, louder this time, followed by the sound of a key card sliding into the lock. The electronic beep seemed to echo through the suite. Hide, Michael urged, pushing something cold and metallic into my hand, the flash drive. Get this to FBI agent Diana Cruz. No one else. Trust no one else. Before I could protest, he was gone, pulling the bathroom door shut behind him. I slid into the massive shower stall, pressing myself against the cold tile, the flash drive clutched in my trembling fist. Through the crack in the bathroom door, I could see Michael straightening his coffee-stained shirt, composing his features into a mask of calm before opening the suite door. Gentlemen, he said, his voice steady, what can I do for you? Two men entered, both in expensive suits that didn't quite hide the bulges of weapons beneath. One was tall and rail-thin, with a face like a skull. The other was shorter, muscular, with a neck as thick as my thigh. Mr. Sullivan, said the taller man, his voice the same gravel I'd heard through the door. Mr. Castellano would like a word. Michael gave a tight smile. Of course. Let me grab my jacket. He moved toward the closet, deliberately away from the bathroom. I held my breath, pressing deeper into the shower stall, praying they wouldn't search the suite. No need, said the shorter man. This won't take long. My blood ran cold at the implication in those words. I watched as Michael's shoulders tensed, the only sign that he understood what was coming. At least let me clean up, he said, gesturing to his stained shirt. I can't meet Enzo looking like this. The men exchanged glances. 5 minutes. The taller one conceded. We'll wait right here. Michael nodded and headed for the bathroom. My heart stopped. I pressed myself harder against the tile, as if I could disappear into it. The bathroom door opened, and Michael stepped inside, closing it behind him. His eyes met mine through the glass shower door, and he pressed a finger to his lips. Then he turned on the faucet, the rush of water masking his movements as he approached the shower. Listen carefully, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the running water. There's a service elevator at the end of the hall. Take it down to the basement. Exit through the loading dock. Go to the Blackbird Cafe across from the hotel. There's a man named Vittorio who owns it. Tell him the sparrow flies at midnight. He'll know what to do. What about you? I whispered back, clutching the flash drive so tightly it dug painfully into my palm. A sad smile crossed his face. I've been running for too long. Just make sure that gets to Cruz. He turned to leave, but I caught his sleeve. They'll kill you. Better me than you, he said simply. Wait 5 minutes after we leave, then run. Don't look back. Before I could say another word, he was gone, closing the bathroom door behind him. I heard him speak to the men in a jovial tone that betrayed none of the fear I'd seen in his eyes. Gentlemen, shall we? The suite door opened and closed, and then there was silence. I counted to 300, each second stretching like an hour, before emerging from the bathroom. The suite was empty, the papers cleared from the desk, the laptop gone. It was as if Michael had never been there at all. With shaking hands, I tucked the flash drive into my bra and left the suite, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone on the floor could hear it. The hallway was deserted as I made my way to the service elevator, pressing the call button repeatedly as if that would make it arrive faster. When the doors finally opened, I nearly collapsed with relief to find it empty. I hit the button for the basement and leaned against the wall, trying to calm my ragged breathing. What had I gotten myself into? Less than an hour ago, My biggest worry had been delivering an espresso without spilling it. Now I was carrying evidence that could bring down one of the most dangerous crime families in the city. The elevator doors opened to the dimly lit basement, the air heavy with the scent of industrial cleaners and damp concrete. I navigated through the maze of storage rooms and laundry facilities to the loading dock, where delivery trucks came and went throughout the day. The metal door to the outside world felt impossibly heavy as I pushed it open, emerging into the alley behind the hotel. Rain had started to fall, a fine mist that clung to my skin and hair as I hurried toward the street. The Blackbird Cafe sat across from the hotel, a small, unassuming place with a faded sign and windows fogged with steam. I'd passed it every day on my way to work, but had never been inside. My budget didn't allow for $5 lattes and artisanal pastries. I pushed open the door, a bell jingling overhead, and stepped into the warm, coffee-scented interior. The cafe was nearly empty, just a couple of students with laptops in one corner and an elderly man reading a newspaper at the counter. Behind the counter stood a man who could only be Vittorio, tall and broad-shouldered, with olive skin and salt and pepper hair tied back in a short ponytail. His forearms were covered in tattoos that disappeared beneath the rolled sleeves of his white shirt. He looked up as I entered, his dark eyes narrowing slightly as they took in my disheveled appearance and hotel uniform. I approached the counter on unsteady legs, my mouth dry as desert sand. "I need to speak with Vittorio," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The man raised an eyebrow. "You're looking at him, sweetheart. What can I get you?" I glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. The sparrow flies at midnight. Vittorio's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, a flicker of recognition quickly masked. He studied me for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. "Marco." He called to the elderly man with the newspaper. "Watch the counter for me." The old man grunted in acknowledgement without looking up, and Vittorio motioned for me to follow him through a door marked "Staff Only." It led to a small, cluttered office with a desk covered in invoices and a wall of security monitors showing different angles of the cafe. "Where's Michael?" he asked, closing the door behind us. "They took him," I said, the reality of what had happened finally hitting me. Tears pricked at my eyes. 2 men. They said Castellano wanted to see him. Vittorio cursed under his breath, running a hand over his face. "How did you get involved?" I told him everything. The espresso delivery, the spilled coffee, the flash drive now burning a hole against my skin. When I finished, Vittorio was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You should have left," he finally said. "Pretended you never saw anything." "I couldn't," I replied, surprised by the firmness in my voice. "He saved my life. Those men would have killed me if they'd found me there." Vittorio sighed heavily. "And now you're in the middle of a war you know nothing about." He held out his hand. "Give me the drive. I'll make sure it gets to Cruz." I hesitated, Michael's words echoing in my mind. "Trust no one else." "How do I know I can trust you?" A smile ghosted across Vittorio's face. "You don't. But right now, I'm all you've got." Before I could decide whether to hand over the flash drive, the door to the office burst open. A man stood in the doorway, tall, imposing, with piercing eyes that seemed to look straight through me. He wore a tailored black suit that probably cost more than my yearly salary, not a wrinkle or speck of dust marring its perfection. But it was his presence that made my breath catch, an aura of power and danger that filled the small room like smoke. Vittorio straightened immediately. "Boss," he said, his tone shifting to one of deep respect. "I was just taking too long," the man finished for him, his voice surprisingly soft but carrying an undercurrent of steel. His eyes never left mine, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Who is she?" I froze, the flash drive suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds against my skin. "Boss?" If Vittorio worked for the Castellanos. My mind raced through scenarios, each worse than the last. "Hotel maid," Vittorio replied carefully. "Says she has information about Sullivan." The man, clearly someone important in the Castellano hierarchy, closed the door behind him and took a step closer to me. I instinctively backed away until I felt the desk press against my spine. There was nowhere else to go. "What's your name?" he asked, still in that deceptively gentle voice. "Elena," I whispered, unable to look away from his gaze. "Elena Reyes." Elena, he repeated, the way my name rolled off his tongue sending shivers down my spine. I'm Dante Castellano. My blood turned to ice, not just any member of the crime family, but a Castellano himself. I'd heard whispers about Dante, the youngest son who had taken over much of the family business after his father's semi-retirement. Cold, calculating, and utterly merciless to his enemies. You look frightened, Elena, he observed, his head tilting slightly. Do you know who I am? I nodded, unable to find my voice. The flash drive seemed to burn against my skin. Good, Dante said, his eyes never leaving mine. Then you understand that lying to me would be unwise. He glanced at Vittorio. Leave us. Vittorio hesitated for a fraction of a second, so brief I almost missed it, before nodding and slipping out of the office. The door closed with a soft click that seemed to echo in the silence. I was alone with Dante Castellano. Michael Sullivan, Dante said, his voice hardening at the name. Tell me exactly what happened in that hotel room. My mind raced. If I told the truth, the flash drive would be discovered and Michael's sacrifice would be for nothing. If I lied, I didn't want to think about what happened to people who lied to Dante Castellano. I was delivering coffee, I began, my voice trembling despite my efforts to control it. I spilled it on him. We were talking when two men came to the door. They said Mr. Castellano wanted to see him. And that's all? Dante asked, taking another step closer. He smelled of expensive cologne and something darker, something dangerous. A maid delivering coffee who happens to know the code phrase to reach Vittorio? Do you think I'm a fool, Elena? My heart hammered so hard I was sure he could hear it. He told me to come here, I admitted. He said Vittorio would help me. Help you with what? Dante was now close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in his late 30s, with features that would have been handsome if not for the coldness in his eyes. I swallowed hard. He said they would kill him. Something flickered in Dante's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or doubt. And why would you care what happens to Michael Sullivan, a man you'd just met? I wouldn't want anyone to die, I whispered. The half-truth easier to tell than a complete lie. Dante studied me for a long moment, his gaze so intense, I felt like he was peeling back layers of my skin to see what lay beneath. Then, without warning, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. I flinched at his touch, and a small, cold smile curved his lips. Sullivan is a federal informant, he said casually, as if discussing the weather. He's been feeding information to the FBI for months, trying to destroy my family. Did he mention that part? I shook my head, afraid to speak. No? What about the flash drive he was carrying? Did he mention that? My breath caught, and I knew immediately that I'd made a mistake. Dante's smile widened, showing teeth. There it is, he murmured. You're a terrible liar, Elena Reyes. His hand moved to my throat, not squeezing, just resting there, a reminder of how easily he could end my life. Where is it? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could see were those cold eyes boring into mine. All I could feel was his hand against my throat. Please, I whispered. I have a father. He's sick. He needs me. Something shifted in Dante's expression, not softening exactly, but changing. His hand moved from my throat to my cheek in a gesture that might have been tender from anyone else. Everyone has someone they care about, he said quietly. I have a family too. Sullivan was trying to destroy that family. Do you understand? Before I could respond, the door opened again, and a man I hadn't seen before stepped in. He wore a suit similar to Dante's but carried himself differently, like a soldier rather than a king. We've got a problem, he said, his eyes flickering to me briefly before returning to Dante. The feds are at the hotel. Sullivan's dead. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Dead. Michael was dead. The man who had saved my life less than an hour ago was gone. Dante cursed softly, his hand dropping from my face. How? Jumped from the 12th floor window, the man replied. Or that's what it'll look like anyway. Bile rose in my throat. They had killed him, and staged it as a suicide, and now they knew about the flash drive, which meant I was next. "Get the car," Dante ordered. "We're leaving, and bring her," he added, nodding toward me. Terror seized me. "Please," I began, but Dante cut me off. "You have two choices, Elena," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Come with me willingly, or I send men to visit your sick father. Which will it be?" The threat struck me like a physical blow. I thought of my father, helpless in his hospital bed, unaware that his daughter had stumbled into something that might get them both killed. "I'll come," I whispered. Dante nodded, as if he'd never doubted my answer. Wise choice. The man disappeared, and Dante turned back to me. "The flash drive," he said, holding out his hand. "Now." With trembling fingers, I reached into my uniform, pulled out the small metal object that had cost a man his life, and placed it in Dante's palm. He pocketed it without looking at it, his eyes still fixed on mine. "If you've made copies," he said softly, "or if there's anything you're not telling me, I'll know, and your father will suffer for it. Understand?" I nodded, unable to speak past the knot of fear in my throat. "Good girl," Dante said, and the praise, however twisted, sent an involuntary shiver through me. "Now come." He took my arm, his grip firm but not painful, and led me out of the office. The cafe had emptied, the students and the elderly man gone. Only Vittorio remained, watching with an unreadable expression as Dante guided me toward the exit. "Clean this up," Dante told him as we passed. "No trace." Vittorio nodded, and I caught a glimpse of something like pity in his eyes before Dante pulled me through the door and into the rain that had grown from a mist to a steady downpour. A black SUV with tinted windows idled at the curb. The man who had delivered the news about Michael stood beside it, opening the rear door as we approached. Two other vehicles, identical to the first, were parked behind it. Dante helped me into the back seat with a courtesy that felt bizarrely out of place given the circumstances. He slid in beside me, and the door closed with a heavy thud that sounded like a cell door slamming shut. The interior was luxurious, soft leather seats, the scent of expensive cologne, and subtle hints of cigars. The driver's compartment was separated by a dark partition, giving the illusion of privacy. "Where are you taking me?" I asked, as the car pulled away from the curb, joining the flow of traffic. "Somewhere safe," Dante replied, his attention on his phone. He typed something quickly, then pocketed the device. "For both of us." I glanced out the window, watching the familiar streets of the city blur past. We were heading toward the river, away from the crowded downtown area, away from help, from witnesses. "You're going to kill me," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. It wasn't a question. Dante turned to me, one eyebrow raised. "If I wanted you dead, Elena, you would already be lying next to Sullivan on the pavement. Then what do you want from me?" "Information," he said simply. "What exactly did Sullivan tell you? What did you see? Who else knows you were there?" I shook my head. "He didn't tell me anything except to deliver the flash drive to someone named Cruz. I don't know what's on it, I swear." Dante studied me, his expression skeptical. "A man like Sullivan, cornered and desperate, hands valuable evidence to a hotel maid he's just met and tells her nothing." Put that way, it did sound implausible. "He said it contained evidence against your family. Names, dates, account numbers, that's all I know." The car turned onto a private drive lined with tall iron gates that opened automatically as we approached. Beyond them stretched a manicured lawn leading to a mansion that looked like something out of a movie, all stone and glass and old-world grandeur. "This is your house?" I asked, momentarily distracted by the sheer opulence of the place. "One of them," Dante replied, a hint of amusement in his voice at my obvious awe. The car stopped at the front entrance, where two men in suits waited. One opened the door, and Dante stepped out, then extended his hand to help me. I hesitated, then took it, allowing him to guide me from the car and up the steps to the massive front door. Inside, the mansion was even more impressive. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, artwork that looked like it belonged in a museum. But I barely registered any of it. my mind still racing with fear and the reality of my situation. Dante led me through a series of rooms to what appeared to be a study. Wood-paneled walls lined with books, a massive desk, and leather chairs that looked soft as butter. He gestured for me to sit, then moved to a cabinet and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. "Drink," he said, handing one to me. "It will help with the shock." I took the glass but didn't drink. "I'm not in shock." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Your hands are shaking. Your pupils are dilated, and you've been biting your lip so hard it's bleeding." He reached out and brushed his thumb across my lower lip, coming away with a smear of red. "That's shock, Elena." The casual intimacy of the gesture made me flinch. I raised the glass and took a sip, the liquor burning a path down my throat. It was unlike anything I'd ever tasted. Rich, smooth, expensive. "Why am I here?" I asked again, setting down the glass. "Why not just take the flash drive and let me go?" Dante sat in the chair across from mine, swirling his drink thoughtfully. "Because Sullivan chose you for a reason, and I need to know what that reason was." "There was no reason," I insisted. "I was just delivering coffee. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time." "There's no such thing as coincidence in my world," Dante said, his voice hardening. "Sullivan was clever, too clever to entrust something so valuable to a random maid." "But that's exactly what happened," I said, frustration momentarily overriding my fear. "I'm nobody. I work at the hotel to pay for my father's medical bills. I didn't know Michael Sullivan before today, and I wish to God I'd never met him." Dante watched me carefully as I spoke, as if cataloging every flicker of emotion that crossed my face. When I finished, he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Tell me about your father," he said, the abrupt change of subject throwing me off balance. "What about him? His name, his condition, the hospital where he's being treated." Fear clutched at my heart again. "Why do you need to know that?" "Verification," Dante replied smoothly. "You claim to be an innocent bystander. I need to confirm your story." I swallowed hard, knowing it wasn't really a choice. "His name is Rafael Reyes. He had a stroke 6 months ago. He's at Mercy General in the long-term care ward." Dante nodded, then pulled out his phone and made a call. "I need information on a patient at Mercy General," he said to whoever answered. "Rafael Reyes." He listened for a moment, then hung up without another word. "What are you doing?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "Making sure you're telling the truth," Dante replied. "If your story checks out, your father will be well taken care of. If not," he let the threat hang in the air. "Please don't hurt him," I whispered. "He's all I have." Something shifted in Dante's expression again. That same indefinable change I'd seen earlier. "We all protect what's ours, Elena," he said quietly. "I'm just making sure you understand the stakes." Before I could respond, the door to the study opened, and the man from earlier, the one who'd told us about Michael's death, entered. He whispered something in Dante's ear, too low for me to hear. Dante's expression darkened. "Bring him in," he ordered. The man nodded and left. Moments later, he returned, dragging a bloodied figure between him and another guard. With horror, I recognized Vittorio, his face swollen, blood soaking through his white shirt. They threw him to the floor at Dante's feet, where he lay groaning in pain. "Do you know what the punishment for betrayal is in my family, Elena?" Dante asked, his voice dangerously soft as he looked down at Vittorio's crumpled form. I shook my head mutely, my eyes fixed on Vittorio. "Death," Dante said simply. "But first, pain. Lots of it." He turned to Vittorio. "Tell her what you did." Vittorio coughed, spitting blood onto the pristine floor. "I was working with Sullivan," he admitted, his voice hoarse, feeding him information. "You were like a brother to me," Dante said, and for the first time, I heard real emotion in his voice, raw pain beneath the cold exterior. "I trusted you with everything." "Your father is a monster," Vittorio spat. "You're becoming just like him." Dante's face hardened, and he nodded to one of the guards, who stepped forward and delivered a brutal kick to Vittorio's ribs. The sound of cracking bone made me flinch. "Stop!" I cried out without thinking. "Please, don't!" Dante's gaze snapped to me, his eyes burning with a cold fire. This is what happens to traitors, Elena. Remember that. He turned back to Vittorio. The flash drive Sullivan gave her. What's on it? Vittorio laughed, a wet, horrible sound. Everything, he gasped. Everything you and your father have worked so hard to hide. Bank accounts, payoffs, bodies. Dante's expression didn't change, but I saw his hand tighten on the arm of his chair. And the copies? Where are they? Vittorio's gaze flickered to me for a brief instant, so quickly I might have imagined it. There aren't any, he said. That was the only one. Dante studied him for a long moment, then sighed deeply. Take him downstairs, he ordered the guards. I'll deal with him later. The guards dragged Vittorio away, leaving smears of blood on the polished floor. I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd just witnessed. This was real. A man had died today, another was about to, and I was trapped in the home of the man who had ordered it all. Dante watched me, something like curiosity in his gaze. You're not going to faint, are you? I shook my head, though the room did seem to be spinning slightly. I've never seen someone hurt like that before. And yet you didn't look away, he observed. Interesting. I hadn't looked away, I realized. Some horrified, primitive part of my brain had forced me to watch every second, as if understanding the brutality might somehow help me survive it. Dante rose from his chair and moved to the desk, where he plugged in the flash drive I'd given him. His back was to me as he typed, shoulders tense as he scanned whatever appeared on the screen. This was my chance. The door was only a few feet away. If I could just slip out without him noticing, maybe I could find a way out of this mansion. Flag down a car on the road. As if reading my thoughts, Dante spoke without turning. The grounds are patrolled by armed guards and dogs, Elena. You wouldn't make it 10 feet past the door. I sank back into my chair, hope deflating. What are you going to do with me? Dante was silent for a long moment, his attention still on the screen. Then he ejected the flash drive and turned to face me. That depends on you. What do you mean? He approached slowly, the flash drive turning over and over between his fingers. Sullivan didn't give you everything, he said. This drive is incomplete. The most damaging files are missing. I stared at him, genuinely confused. I don't know anything about that. He gave me one drive. That's it. And yet, Vittorio's reaction when I mentioned copies... Dante mused. He looked at you. Why would he do that, I wonder? My mind raced back to that moment in the cafe office before Dante had arrived. How do I know I can trust you? I'd asked Vittorio. You don't, he'd replied. But right now, I'm all you've got. Had he known more than he was telling me? I don't know, I said truthfully. I'd never met him before today. Dante studied me, his gaze penetrating. Do you know what I think, Elena? I think Sullivan chose you for a reason. I think you're more involved than you're admitting. I'm not, I insisted, my voice rising with frustration. I'm a maid. I deliver coffee and change sheets and scrub toilets for rich people who don't even see me. Why would an FBI informant trust me with anything? That's exactly what I'm trying to figure out, Dante said, moving closer until he stood directly in front of me. He reached down and tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. What makes you special? There was something in his gaze, something beyond the cold calculation I'd seen before, something almost appreciative. It sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. Nothing, I whispered. I'm no one. Dante's thumb brushed across my lower lip, a repeat of the earlier gesture that had left me so unsettled. I doubt that very much, Elena Reyes. His phone rang, breaking the tense moment. He straightened, pulling the device from his pocket and answering with a curt, yes. I watched as his expression shifted, hardening into something cold and dangerous. When? He asked, turning away from me. How many? No, don't move him yet. I'm on my way. He ended the call and turned back to me, decision crystallizing in his eyes. It seems your story checks out, he said. Your father suffered a stroke 6 months ago and has been in long-term care ever since. You've been paying his medical bills, which currently amount to just over $83,000. The precision of the numbers sent a chill through me. In a matter of minutes, he'd uncovered details about my life that I shared with almost no one. Unfortunately, Dante continued, pocketing his phone. I can't let you go yet, not until I'm certain you're telling me everything. What more do you want from me? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. I've given you the drive. I've told you everything I know. And yet the FBI has just raided one of my warehouses, Dante replied, his voice dangerously soft. Quite a coincidence, don't you think? My blood ran cold. That has nothing to do with me. Perhaps not, Dante conceded. But until I'm sure, you'll remain my guest. He moved to the door and opened it, revealing a woman in a sleek black dress waiting outside. Sophia will show you to your room. I suggest you make yourself comfortable. You may be here for some time. The woman, Sophia, entered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. This way, please, she said, her voice carrying a faint accent I couldn't place. I stood on shaky legs, looking to Dante. My father? We'll be fine, Dante assured me. As long as you cooperate, no harm will come to him. In fact, he added with a cold smile, I've taken the liberty of settling his medical bills. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. The revelation stunned me. $83,000, wiped away with a phone call. The debt that had been crushing me for months, gone just like that. Why would you do that? I asked, suspicious of his motives. Insurance, Dante replied simply. Now you owe me. Before I could respond, he was gone, striding down the hallway with the confident gait of a man used to commanding every room he entered. Sophia gestured for me to follow her, and I did, too numb to resist. She led me up a sweeping staircase and down a long corridor lined with artwork that must have cost millions. Each step took me deeper into the heart of Dante Castellano's world, a world I suddenly feared I might never escape. The room she brought me to was larger than my entire apartment, with a massive 4-poster bed, plush carpets, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. It might have been beautiful if it weren't a prison. There are clothes in the closet, Sophia said, indicating a door on the far wall. Dinner will be at 7. Do you need anything else? I shook my head, unable to form words past the knot of fear in my throat. The bathroom is through there, she continued, pointing to another door. You should shower and change before dinner. Mr. Castellano expects his guests to dress appropriately. I'm not a guest, I said, finding my voice at last. I'm a prisoner. Sophia's expression remained impassive. Call it what you like. The expectations remain the same. She moved to the door. One more thing. Don't try to leave this room. The house is heavily guarded, and Mr. Castellano does not tolerate disobedience. With that parting warning, she left, closing the door behind her. I heard the distinct click of a lock engaging, confirming what I already knew. I was trapped. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the enormity of my situation finally crashing over me. Less than 12 hours ago, I'd been an anonymous maid, invisible to the world. Now a man was dead, another was being tortured, and I was locked in the mansion of the city's most dangerous crime lord. And my father, I hadn't called to check on him since morning. He'd be wondering where I was, why I hadn't visited after my shift as I always did. Would the hospital tell him about the bills being paid? Would they tell him who had paid them? I moved to the window, hoping to gauge where exactly I was. But the view revealed nothing helpful. Just immaculate gardens stretching to a high stone wall in the distance. Beyond that, dense trees obscured any view of the outside world. With nothing else to do, I explored the room. The closet was filled with women's clothing in what appeared to be my size. Everything from casual wear to formal gowns, all with designer labels I recognized from the hotel's wealthiest guests. The bathroom was equally luxurious. Marble and gold fixtures, a shower large enough for 5 people, and a soaking tub by a window overlooking a private garden. How long had Dante been planning to bring someone here? Or did he regularly keep women against their will? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I showered quickly, the hot water doing little to ease the tension in my muscles. Among the many products lining the shower shelves, I found shampoo and body wash that smelled of jasmine and vanilla. I used them sparingly, uncomfortable with accepting even this small luxury from my captor. The closet presented a new dilemma. My maid's uniform was stained with coffee and sweat, but putting on clothes provided by Dante felt like an acceptance of my situation. In the end, practicality won out. I I selected the most modest items I could find: black pants, a simple blue blouse, and flat shoes that would be easy to run in if the opportunity arose. As I dressed, my mind kept returning to Vittorio's look when Dante had mentioned copies of the flash drive. There had been something there, a message intended for me, but what could it mean? I'd given Dante the only drive Michael had given me. The memory of Michael's face floated before me. The fear in his eyes when he'd pushed the drive into my hand, the resignation when he'd returned to face the men who would ultimately kill him. He had saved my life, and I had failed to protect the evidence he'd died for. A knock at the door startled me from my dark thoughts. "Dinner in 10 minutes, called Sophia's voice. "Are you ready?" I moved to the door, testing the handle. To my surprise, it turned easily in my grasp. It was unlocked now, though I had definitely heard it lock earlier. I pulled it open to find Sophia waiting, her eyes appraising my outfit with something like approval. "Follow me," she said, turning without waiting for a response. I trailed behind her through the maze-like corridors of the mansion, trying to memorize the route. Left at the top of the stairs, right past a room with a grand piano, down another hallway lined with family portraits. The faces in the paintings watched our passage with cold, painted eyes, generations of Castellanos who had built their fortune on blood and fear. Sophia led me to a dining room dominated by a long table that could easily seat 20. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the polished wood and fine china. At the head of the table sat Dante, now changed into a crisp white shirt, open at the collar. He rose as we entered, a gesture of old-world courtesy that seemed bizarre under the circumstances. "Elena," he said, as if welcoming an honored guest rather than a captive. "You look much better. Please sit." He indicated the chair to his right. I hesitated, then moved to take the seat, keeping as much distance between us as the arrangement would allow. Sophia disappeared silently, leaving us alone. "Wine?" Dante asked, reaching for a decanter of deep red liquid. "No, thank you," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He smiled, pouring himself a glass. "Still afraid I might drug you? If I wanted to harm you, Elena, there are much more direct ways." The casual threat sent a chill down my spine. "I don't drink much," I said. "Water, then?" Dante suggested, filling a crystal glass from a pitcher on the table. "You should stay hydrated. It's been an eventful day. An eventful day." Such a mild way to describe what had happened. A man's death, another's torture, my own abduction. I took the water, suddenly aware of how thirsty I was, and drank deeply. "I've had a very interesting conversation with my father," Dante said, watching me over the rim of his wine glass. "About Michael Sullivan and his activities." I set down my water, waiting. Whatever was coming, I doubted it was good news for me. "It seems Sullivan was more clever than we gave him credit for," Dante continued. "The flash drive you gave me was indeed incomplete, a decoy, designed to make us believe we'd recovered all the evidence." "I wouldn't know anything about that," I said carefully. "No?" Dante asked, his voice deceptively light. "That's strange, because according to my father's sources, Sullivan had an accomplice. Someone who helped him gather evidence against my family for months. Someone he trusted implicitly." His eyes locked with mine. "Someone who looks remarkably like you." My heart stuttered in my chest. "That's impossible. I'd never met him before today, and yet," Dante said, leaning forward, "the timing is quite convenient, isn't it? Sullivan knows we've discovered his betrayal. He needs to get his evidence to the FBI. And suddenly there you are, the perfect innocent bystander delivering coffee at exactly the right moment." "It wasn't like that," I insisted, panic rising. "I was assigned that delivery randomly. Ask the hotel manager. Ask anyone." "I did," Dante replied. "And do you know what I discovered? The guest in room 1242 never ordered coffee. There was no request logged in the hotel system." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. If no one had ordered coffee, why had I been sent to that room? "I don't understand," I whispered, genuinely confused. "The supervisor told me—" I stopped, a horrible realization dawning. The supervisor. "Marcel Davis," Dante supplied. "Worked at the Grand Plaza for 3 years. No criminal record. exemplary employee reviews. His smile was cold. Also, coincidentally, the brother-in-law of FBI agent Diana Cruz. The name sent a jolt through me, the same agent Michael had told me to contact. The room seemed to spin around me as pieces fell into place. I was set up, I breathed. But why me? Why would they involve someone who knew nothing? That, Dante said, is exactly what I intend to find out. He snapped his fingers, and 2 men entered the dining room, carrying a struggling figure between them. With horror, I recognized Marcel, my supervisor from the hotel. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, blood caking his nose and mouth. They forced him into a chair across from me, where he slumped forward, barely conscious. Marcel Davis, Dante said, his voice hardening. Why don't you tell Elena exactly why you sent her to room 1242 today? Marcel's good eye found mine, filled with pain and something else. Guilt. I'm sorry, he croaked. I didn't know. What would happen? They said, just deliver. A message. Who said? Dante demanded, his voice sharp as a blade. Cruz? Marcel nodded weakly. Sullivan needed extraction. Clean, no connections. And Elena? Dante pressed. Why her specifically? Marcel's eye flicked to me again. They said she was perfect. No one would suspect. Who is they, Marcel? Dante's patience was clearly wearing thin. Give me names. But Marcel's head had slumped forward, consciousness fading. Dante nodded to one of the men, who produced a syringe and jabbed it into Marcel's neck. The supervisor jerked upright, gasping. Names, Marcel, Dante repeated. Or things will get much worse for you. Cruz, Marcel gasped, the drug forcing lucidity. And Reyes? Dante went very still. Reyes? My blood turned to ice. What does that mean? I whispered. Reyes? Who? Marcel's gaze fixed on me, clarity briefly returning to his pain-clouded eye. Rafael Reyes, he said. Your father. The world shattered around me. That's impossible, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. My father had a stroke. He can barely speak. He's been in the hospital for 6 months. No, Marcel said, shaking his head weakly. He was FBI. Deep cover. The stroke, not real. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My father, the man I'd worked myself to exhaustion for, the reason I'd taken the demeaning hotel job, the center of my world since my mother died, had been lying to me all this time. You're lying, I said, rising from my chair. My father is sick. I've seen him. I've sat with him every day. He can't even feed himself. Elena, Dante said, his voice oddly gentle. Sit down. I ignored him, moving around the table to grab Marcel by his shirt front. Tell me the truth. My father is not FBI. Marcel's gaze was pitying now. I'm sorry, he whispered. It was all set up. You were the perfect cover. His devoted daughter. No one would suspect. Visiting him every day, passing information. The strength went out of my legs, and I would have collapsed if Dante hadn't suddenly appeared beside me, his arm around my waist, supporting me. He guided me back to my chair, his touch surprisingly gentle. Water, he ordered one of the men, who quickly refilled my glass. Dante pressed it into my trembling hands. Drink. I obeyed automatically, my mind still reeling from Marcel's revelation. My father, my whole life, had it all been a lie? Take him away, Dante told his men. Keep him alive. I have more questions for him. They dragged Marcel out, leaving me alone with Dante once more. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I'd just learned. You truly didn't know, Dante said after a long moment, studying my face. It wasn't a question. I shook my head numbly. How could I not know? He's my father. The best lies are the ones closest to us. Dante said, an unexpected note of sympathy in his voice. We never question what we believe we already know. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of him. What happens now? Dante leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine thoughtfully. Now, he said, we visit your father. The car ride to Mercy General Hospital passed in a blur. I sat in the back of Dante's SUV, watching raindrops race down the tinted windows, feeling as though I'd stepped into someone else's life. Nothing made sense anymore. Not my father's apparent betrayal, not my own unwitting role in whatever game was being played, and certainly not the strange gentleness with which Dante Castellano now treated me. He sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, yet he hadn't touched me since helping me into the car. His men, 4 of them, heavily armed beneath their tailored suits, surrounded the vehicle in 2 additional SUVs, a mobile fortress protecting their boss. "We're approaching the hospital," Dante said, breaking the silence that had stretched between us. "When we go in, you will act normally. If anyone asks, I'm a family friend visiting your father, understand?" I nodded mechanically. What choice did I have? "Good," he continued. "If you try to signal anyone or escape, my men have orders regarding your father. I don't think I need to elaborate." The threat was clear, even if my father had deceived me for months. I still couldn't reconcile the man who had raised me, who had taught me to ride a bike, who had held me when my mother died, who had worked 2 jobs to put me through community college, with the FBI agent Marcel had described. The SUV pulled up to the hospital entrance, and Dante's driver opened the door. Rain had given way to a damp, chilly evening, the sky hanging low and gray over the city. Dante emerged first, then extended his hand to help me out. Again, that strange courtesy from a man who had threatened my life hours earlier. We entered the hospital with 2 of Dante's men trailing at a discreet distance. I led the way to the long-term care ward, a journey I'd made hundreds of times over the past 6 months. The staff recognized me, offering warm smiles and familiar greetings. None seemed to find anything unusual about the handsome, well-dressed man accompanying me. "Elena, honey, visiting late today," called Nurse Martinez from the desk. Her eyes slid appreciatively over Dante. "And with company." I forced a smile. "This is a friend. He wanted to meet Dad." She nodded approvingly. "That's nice. Your father's having a good day." More alert than usual. Her innocent words now carried sinister implications. More alert than usual, because he wasn't really sick, because the stroke had been a cover story. Dante's hand settled at the small of my back, guiding me forward. "Which room?" he asked quietly. "End of the hall," I replied, painfully aware of his touch. "Room 412. As we approached the familiar doorway, my steps slowed. What would I say to my father? How could I face him knowing what I now suspected? "Courage, Elena," Dante murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "It's time for the truth." I took a deep breath and entered the room. It looked exactly as it always did. The hospital bed positioned to face the window. The chair where I sat during my daily visits, the small table crowded with the magazines I brought, and the cards from well-wishers. And in the bed, my father. Thin, gray-haired, his once strong body diminished by illness. Or so I'd believed. His eyes widened when he saw me, then narrowed as they fixed on Dante. In that instant, I knew Marcel had been telling the truth. There was recognition in my father's gaze, and something else. A sharpness, an alertness that had no place in the eyes of a stroke victim. "Hello, Dad," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer, his gaze still locked on Dante, who closed the door behind us and leaned against it, blocking the exit. "Rafael Reyes," Dante said, his tone conversational. "Or should I call you Agent Reyes? It's been a long time." My father's face remained impassive, but his right hand, the one supposedly weakened by the stroke, twitched toward the call button beside his bed. Dante moved with surprising speed, plucking the device from reach. "No interruptions," he said softly. "We have much to discuss." My father's eyes found mine, and I saw something I'd never seen there before: fear. Not for himself, but for me. "Elena," he said, his voice stronger and clearer than it had been in months. "Are you hurt?" The sound of his normal voice, after months of slurred speech and painful attempts at communication, hit me like a physical blow. "You lied to me," I whispered, tears finally spilling over. "All this time you were lying." "To protect you," he insisted, abandoning all pretense of disability as he pushed himself to a more upright position. "Everything I did was to keep you safe. Safe? I repeated incredulously. I was nearly killed today because of you. A man died right in front of me. Another is being tortured right now. How is any of that keeping me safe? Dante watched our exchange with interest, making no move to intervene. My father's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. Sullivan wasn't supposed to involve you, he said, genuine regret in his voice. That wasn't the plan. When I heard what happened at the hotel, I tried to stop it, but it was too late. What was the plan exactly? Dante interjected, moving closer to the bed. Perhaps you'd like to explain to your daughter how you've spent the past 2 years gathering evidence against my family, while using her as your unwitting cover. My father's expression hardened. You know nothing about my reasons, Castellano. Enlighten me, Dante suggested, perching on the edge of the visitor's chair, deceptively relaxed. Enlighten your daughter. She deserves the truth, don't you think? My father looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd always known. The loving, protective father who had raised me alone after my mother died. Your mother's death wasn't an accident, he said quietly. She was killed. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. What? Mom died in a car crash. The other driver was drunk. The other driver worked for the Castellanos, my father said, his eyes never leaving mine. Enzo Castellano ordered her death to send me a message. She knew too much. I turned to Dante, searching his face for denial or confirmation. His expression revealed nothing. My wife was a prosecutor, my father continued, addressing Dante now. She was building a case against your father's operations, getting close. Too close. So he had her killed and made it look like an accident. That was before my time, Dante said, his voice neutral. I was still in college, but you know about it, my father pressed. You know what your father did. Something flickered in Dante's eyes. Discomfort, perhaps, or doubt. My father has done many things I don't approve of, he said carefully. But I find it convenient that you can accuse him of a crime that happened 15 years ago with no evidence. There is evidence, my father said. On the flash drive. The one Sullivan gave Elena. I shook my head, confusion mounting. I gave Dante the drive. There was only one. A ghost of a smile touched my father's lips. Was there? Dante was on his feet in an instant, moving to the bedside. What are you talking about, Reyes? Instead of answering Dante, my father looked at me. The necklace, he said softly. The one I gave you for your birthday last month. Have you worn it today? My hand flew to my throat, where the delicate silver pendant always hung. A small bird in flight, my mother's favorite. I'd put it on this morning, as I did every day. In the chaos that followed, I'd forgotten it was there. Yes, I whispered, understanding dawning. I never take it off. Let me see it, Dante demanded, turning to me. With shaking fingers, I unclasped the chain and handed it to him. He examined it closely, turning the bird pendant over in his palm. Then his thumb pressed something, and the tiny silver wings sprang open, revealing a miniature storage device embedded in the bird's body. Dante's eyes met mine, a mixture of admiration and anger swirling in their depths. You've been wearing the evidence against my family around your neck, he said softly. All this time. She didn't know, my father said, his voice hardening. Leave her out of this, Castellano. This is between you and me. It's too late for that, Dante replied, closing the pendant and slipping it into his pocket. She's already involved. He turned back to my father. What's on this drive that wasn't on the other one? My father's expression became unreadable. Everything, he said simply. Bank records, witness statements, surveillance footage, enough to put your father away for life. And me? Dante asked, something vulnerable flashing across his face. Am I implicated? A long moment passed before my father answered. No, he admitted. You've kept your hands cleaner than the rest of your family. Smart. Cautious. His eyes narrowed. But there's enough to destroy everything your father built. Dante absorbed this information silently, his gaze distant, calculating. Then he turned to me. Wait outside, he ordered. I need to speak with your father alone. Fear clutched at my heart. No. Whatever you have to say it in front of me. Elena, my father said gently. It's okay. Do as he says. I looked between them. The father who had lied to me my entire life, and the dangerous man who had abducted me, yet now seemed my only source of truth. If you hurt him— I won't, Dante interrupted. You have my word. His word. As if the promise of a crime lord meant anything. But I had no choice. I moved to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. 5 minutes, I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. Then I'm coming back in. Dante nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. I stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind me. One of Dante's men stood a few feet away, his eyes tracking my every movement. I leaned against the wall, my mind racing. My mother had been murdered. My father was an FBI agent, and I had been an unwitting pawn in a dangerous game between law enforcement and one of the most powerful crime families in the city. The necklace my father had given me, the one I treasured as a connection to my mother, had been evidence all along. Had he cared about me at all, or had I simply been a convenient cover for his operation, a daughter who visited her sick father daily, passing information without even knowing it? The minutes ticked by, each one stretching like an hour. What were they discussing behind that closed door? Would Dante keep his word not to harm my father? And if he did, what then? I was still his prisoner, still a liability. Just as I was about to re-enter the room, the door opened. Dante emerged, his expression unreadable. We're leaving, he said simply. What? No, I protested. I need to talk to my father. You'll have time for that later, Dante replied, taking my arm. Right now, we need to move. The FBI is on its way. Panic surged through me. How do you know that? Your father told me, Dante said, already guiding me toward the exit. They've tracked the flash drive. They know you're with me. So, let me go, I insisted, trying to pull away from his grip. Let me stay with my father. Dante's hold tightened. That's not an option, Elena. Your father made a deal. Your safety in exchange for the drive and time for me to get clear. A deal? With you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why would he do that? Because he knows what will happen if the FBI gets their hands on this evidence, Dante said, his voice low and urgent as we hurried down the corridor. It's not just my father who would fall. It's half the city's government, police force, judiciary. The chaos would be unimaginable, and you'd be caught in the middle of it all. We reached the hospital exit, where Dante's men were already bringing the cars around. Rain had begun to fall again, heavy drops splattering against the pavement. I don't understand, I said, as he ushered me into the waiting SUV. My father is FBI. Why would he protect your family? Dante slid in beside me, his face illuminated by the flashing emergency lights of approaching vehicles in the distance. He's not protecting my family, he said grimly. He's protecting you, and I gave him my word that I would keep you safe. The door closed, sealing us in the quiet interior of the car. Through the rain-streaked window, I caught a glimpse of my father watching from his hospital room window, no longer pretending to be disabled, his face etched with worry and regret. Where are you taking me? I asked, as the convoy of black SUVs pulled away from the hospital, just as the first FBI vehicles came into view. Dante's eyes met mine in the dim light. Somewhere your father's colleagues won't find us. Somewhere we can figure out what to do with the evidence you've been carrying. As the hospital disappeared behind us, I realized I was now truly caught between two worlds, my father's and Dante's, with no idea which one I could trust. The safe house was nothing like I had imagined. No fortified compound or underground bunker, just a modest cabin nestled in dense woods about 2 hours outside the city. From the outside, it looked abandoned. Weathered timber, overgrown path, windows dark and shuttered. Inside, however, it was surprisingly comfortable, with modern furniture, a fully stocked kitchen, and state-of-the-art security systems hidden beneath the rustic exterior. No one knows about this place, Dante explained, as he disabled the alarm system. Not my father, not my security team, just me. He glanced at me. And now you. The implication wasn't lost on me. This was his personal retreat, a place where Dante Castellano could be just a man, not a crime boss. The fact that he had brought me here suggested either extraordinary trust or desperation. Perhaps both. Why here? I asked, standing awkwardly in the center of the main room as he moved around, turning on lights and checking the perimeter. Because it's the last place anyone would look for me, he replied, drawing the curtains closed. The FBI will be watching all known Castellano properties. My father's men will be searching for me too. Once they realize I've gone off-grid with evidence that could destroy the family, your own father would turn on you? The concept seemed alien to me, even after discovering my own father's deception. A mirthless smile touched Dante's lips. My father would sacrifice anyone to protect himself and his empire, even his son. He paused, something vulnerable flashing in his eyes. Especially a son who's been trying to distance the family from the worst of his father's business practices. That revelation surprised me. You've been trying to legitimate the Castellano operations? Trying, Dante emphasized, moving to a cabinet and pulling out a bottle of whiskey. My father sees it as weakness. He believes power comes from fear, from violence. He poured 2 glasses and offered one to me. I believe it comes from respect, from building something people want to be part of, not something they're terrified to leave. I accepted the glass, watching him carefully. Is that why my father said you weren't implicated on the drive? Because you've kept your hands clean? Dante took a long drink before answering. Cleaner, not clean. I've done things I'm not proud of, Elena. I won't pretend otherwise. He moved to sit across from me, his posture suddenly weary. But I've been trying to move the family toward legitimate businesses. Real estate, import-export, hospitality. My father resists at every turn. I sipped the whiskey, the burn in my throat matching the conflicted feelings swirling inside me. So what happens now? With the drive? Dante pulled the silver bird pendant from his pocket, turning it over in his palm thoughtfully. That depends. On what? On whether you believe your father's story about your mother's death. The question caught me off guard. Why wouldn't I believe him? Because he lied to you about everything else, Dante pointed out. He lied about his occupation, his stroke, your role in his operation. Why not lie about this too? The suggestion sent a wave of unease through me. What reason would he have to lie about my mother's murder? Motivation, Dante said simply. To justify his vendetta against my family. To ensure your loyalty if you ever discovered the truth. I shook my head, unwilling to accept it. No, he wouldn't lie about that. He loved my mother. I'm sure he did, Dante conceded. But that doesn't mean her death was a murder ordered by my father. Then what was it? Dante sighed, leaning forward. A tragic accident, exactly as the police report stated. My father has done many unconscionable things, Elena, but he's never targeted law enforcement or prosecutors. It's bad for business. It brings too much heat. I wanted to dismiss his words as self-serving lies, but something in his expression, a genuine earnestness I hadn't seen before, gave me pause. How can I possibly know who's telling the truth? My entire life has been built on lies. You can't, Dante admitted. You can only decide who you trust. Trust. Such a simple word for such an impossible concept. How could I trust my father after discovering his deception? How could I trust Dante, a man who had abducted me and threatened my life only hours ago? I don't trust either of you, I said honestly. A smile touched his lips, small, but genuine. Smart girl. He rose and moved to a painting on the wall, swinging it aside to reveal a safe. With quick, practiced movements, he opened it and placed the necklace inside, along with his phone. These stay here until we figure out our next move. No electronic signals to trace. Our next move? There is no our, Dante. I'm your prisoner, remember? He turned back to me, something shifting in his expression. Are you? The doors aren't locked, Elena. The keys to the SUV are on the counter. You could leave right now if you wanted to. I stared at him in disbelief. You'd let me go? Just like that? Where would you go? He asked, not unkindly. Back to your father, who used you as an unwitting spy, to the FBI, who set you up as bait, or perhaps to my father's men, who are undoubtedly looking for both of us now. He shook his head. You're safer here, with me. He was right, and I hated that he was right. I had nowhere to go, no one to trust. My entire world had collapsed in the space of a day. What do you want from me? I asked, suddenly exhausted. Why am I here? Dante studied me for a long moment, his gaze intent. Because against all logic, I believe you're the only person in this mess who hasn't been playing an angle. You're the only one with nothing to gain and everything to lose. He moved closer, stopping just short of touching me, and because I need someone to trust right now, even if that trust isn't returned. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the cold, calculating crime boss who had terrified me in his mansion. This was a man backed into a corner, making difficult choices that would have life-altering consequences. What are you going to do with the evidence? I asked. Dante ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture of frustration. I don't know yet. If I destroy it, my father continues his reign of terror. If I turn it over to the FBI, the fallout destroys countless lives, including innocent people who depend on Castellano businesses for their livelihoods. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. What would you do? The question startled me. No one in this saga had asked for my opinion, least of all the man who had abducted me. I don't know, I admitted. I don't have enough information to make that kind of decision. Then let me give you information, Dante said, settling beside me. The drive contains evidence of my father's crimes spanning 30 years. Murder, extortion, bribery, drug trafficking. Enough to put him away for multiple lifetimes. He took another drink. It also contains the names of every official on his payroll. Judges, police officers, city councilors. The entire system is compromised, Elena. If it all comes crashing down at once, the power vacuum would create chaos. Rival organizations would move in. The violence would be unprecedented. So you're saying the devil you know is better than the one you don't, I summarized. Dante nodded. In some ways, yes. My father is a monster, but he's a predictable monster. The organizations waiting to take his place are worse. Then what's the alternative? Let your father continue unchecked? No, Dante said firmly. That's not an option. But there might be a third way, a controlled transition. Use selected evidence to remove my father and his closest allies, while keeping the most damning evidence against city officials in reserve. Use the threat of exposure to force reforms rather than wholesale destruction. And who would oversee this controlled transition? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I would, Dante confirmed. With the right leverage, I could redirect the Castellano Empire toward legitimate enterprises, phase out the criminal operations gradually, minimize the collateral damage. You want to use the evidence to stage a coup against your own father, I said, not bothering to hide my skepticism. And then what? You become the new benevolent crime lord? Dante didn't flinch from the accusation. I become the man who dismantles the empire from the inside, piece by piece. It would take time, years probably, but it could be done with minimal bloodshed. Why would you do that? Turn against your own family? Something darkened in Dante's expression. Because my father killed my mother too, he said quietly. Not with a staged car accident or hired hitman. He did it slowly, with years of abuse and fear, until she took her own life rather than live another day under his control. The revelation stunned me into silence. Dante continued, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. I was 15 when I found her. My father called it weakness, said she wasn't strong enough to be a Castellano. His eyes met mine, raw with remembered pain. I swore that day that I would destroy him, but I had to be smart about it, patient. I had to become someone he trusted, someone he believed was just like him. And now you have the means to fulfill that promise, I said, gesturing toward the safe where the evidence was locked away. With your help, Dante confirmed. I blinked in surprise. My help? What could I possibly do? Your father trusts you, despite his deception. The FBI would listen to you as a victim in all this. You could help broker a deal, selective prosecution in exchange for a controlled dismantling of the Castellano Empire. Why would I help you? I asked, genuinely puzzled by his request. After everything that's happened, Dante moved closer, his eyes intense. Because you've seen enough of both sides to know there are no heroes in this story, Elena. Your father used you. The FBI used you. My father would kill you without hesitation. I'm offering you a chance to turn this nightmare into something meaningful, to save lives rather than destroy them. His words resonated more than I wanted to admit. Throughout this ordeal, I'd been a pawn, moved across the board by players with their own agendas. Dante was offering me agency, a voice in how this ended. I need time to think, I said finally. Dante nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course. The bedroom is through there. Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning. He moved to leave, but I caught his wrist, surprising us both with the contact. Why do you care what I think? You have the evidence. You could make this decision without me. Dante looked down at my hand on his wrist, then back to my face. Because in a world where everyone is playing angles, your moral compass is the only one I trust. You have no agenda here except doing what's right. You barely know me, I pointed out. I know enough, he replied softly. I've watched you face unimaginable revelations with courage. I've seen you stand up to me when men twice your size wouldn't dare. I've witnessed your loyalty to a father who didn't deserve it. His free hand came up to gently brush a strand of hair from my face. In less than a day, Elena Reyes, you've shown more integrity than most people demonstrate in a lifetime. The intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. For a moment we stood frozen, connected by more than just my hand on his wrist. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell. Rest, he said again. Tomorrow, we decide the fate of many lives, including our own. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Dante. He paused, looking back. Thank you for telling me the truth, about everything. Something like hope flickered in his eyes. Always, he promised. That night, as I lay in an unfamiliar bed in a cabin in the woods, I realized that in the span of 24 hours, my life had transformed completely. I had lost the father I thought I knew, discovered truths that shattered my understanding of the past, and found an unexpected ally in a man who should have been my enemy. By morning, I knew what needed to be done. When I emerged from the bedroom, I found Dante at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he hadn't slept at all. I'll help you, I said without preamble. Not for your sake, or my father's, but for all the innocent people caught in the middle of this war. Relief washed over his face, followed by something deeper, gratitude, respect, and perhaps something more that neither of us was ready to name. It won't be easy, he warned. Nothing worthwhile ever is, I replied, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. As the morning sun filtered through the cabin windows, casting long shadows across the floor, I felt something I hadn't expected to find in this nightmare: hope. Not just for justice, or vengeance, or even redemption, but for a future built on truth instead of lies. And as Dante's hand briefly covered mine across the table, I knew that whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone.